Hi, my name's Starsky and welcome to From the Studio on Clubbing TV. In this episode, we're going to take a look at Behringer's long-awaited take on the UBXa. It's their UBXa. Here I've got the UBXa from Behringer. It's their emulation of the absolute classic Oberheim UBXa from 1980, and it's been years in the making, but it's finally arrived. And in this video I'm going to sidestep the fact that it's an emulation of a vintage synth and look at it as a synth in its own right. In other words, what are you getting for your money? A comparison with my Oberheim UBXa will look into the similarities between the two coming soon, and although that's not a vintage unit either, it's considered to be as close as you'll get. So let's put that to one side for the time being and just take a look at what we have in front of us here. And I have to start this by saying I've messed up a little bit. I did record a whole Clubbing TV episode with the synth itself, which is now gone because my mate was desperate to get his hands on it. So it's now on the other side of the country, and then I realised that the recording didn't work properly. So what I'm going to do in this episode, which is a bit unusual, but it'll work, hopefully, is I'm going to take what I did for my YouTube videos, which was, I think it's over an hour and a half worth of recording, and squish it down into the 10 minutes that we've got here to show you the most sort of important points in it. And the first one is, what does it actually sound like? What is it? And is it worth it? And I think I have to start off by giving a round of applause to all the folks at Behringer that have pulled this off, because I bought this for £899 back in December 2023. £899 for a 16 voice polysynth. That's absolutely staggering. It's a little bit more expensive now. It's about between £1,000 and £1,100 thereabouts. But even at those prices, it's incredible. I have to say I'm gobsmacked. And when you pull this out of the box, it really does feel like a grown-up synth. It feels like Behringer's first grown-up polysynth. And that's not to diss the DeepMind in any way. It just didn't have a certain vibe for me, and I don't know what that is. I know that's really subjective. Maybe it's because this does look like a vintage synth, and I don't mean any vintage synth in particular, because it does look like the UBXa. Just the fact that the knobs are nicely well spaced, it hasn't got a big flashy screen, the buttons are sort of vintage style buttons. The knobs themselves are a little bit wobbly. You can see they've got plastic shafts, and they feel a little bit more wobbly than something like the Pro 800 or any of the Eurorack versions of their synths. And I think that's just because the knobs are bigger, maybe, and you've got more space between them. But it's absolutely nothing that I'd be worried about. Plenty of other synths have got plastic knobs. The really expensive ones like the UBXa have metal knobs or metal shafts, but that is 4 times the price. And 16 voices. Not many analog synths can do that. So yeah, it has a certain je ne sais quoi about it. And don't ask me what I mean by that. It's a purely subjective thing. But I do think Behringer have delivered. And in one word, I'd say I'm flabbergasted. Let's just take a look at how the interface works. It's really quite simple. Up and down the presets, we've got a shift key here, and that'll take you to bank A, B, C, and D. We've got 4 banks with 128 presets in each. And what I wanted to show here was that we've got these different sort of light grey parameters, and they're like secondary parameters. So there's not a lot of actual menu diving, it's all here. If I hit shift, we're now in secondary function mode, and anything with a secondary function has a sort of half-lit LED. You can see these are off maybe, and these are on. All these are on here. Take it off again, we're now back into the standard mode. Shift mode, secondary functions. Not sure if the camera's picking that up, but let's do something like put an LFO on the frequency of oscillator 1. Go to shift mode, and now we're on quantize 1. If we press this, it'll now quantize that LFO. So it's quantized that to semitones. If we look over here, we've got delay and we've got attack. So let's turn the delay up. So it waits before it brings in the LFO. Then the attack, so it'll have a gradual attack. So it's not quite as simple as it might look at first. There's lots of little things in here to have a play with. Okay, before we start, what we have here isn't an original UBXa. It's an UBX8 from Oberheim from 2022, and it's got an UBXa style overlay that I got from synthoverlays.com. So what I'm doing here is comparing two modern emulations of the UBXa. In other words, the two options we have for buying a new unit where you can recreate those classic tones. It's not a vintage unit and a modern unit. I just want to get that straight before we start. But the UBX8 is generally considered to be a very, very close recreation of the original. The UBXa has yet to be seen, but it was developed with a lot of beta testers, and each of those had their own machines with their own rates of degradation and their own calibration, I suppose, so all slightly different. So what they've done is create what you'd suppose you'd call a best fit from a number of units, and I can't really argue with that. I've made this demo of two Korg Poly 6s a couple of years ago. They both sound like Poly 6s because they are both Poly 6s, but they definitely don't sound identical. So I think a best fit approach is perfectly reasonable, a good way of doing it. Now, I've not gone into too much on the functionality of the two machines. I did record a whole section of the different things that the different synths can do. It just got a bit tedious, so I've edited it out because you're here for the sounds after all, aren't you? The standout differences are, though, the Behringer has got 16 voices, it's got a Poly Aftertouch keyboard and NPE compatibility. Plus there's an onboard sequencer, it's saved per patch, and an 8-slot mod matrix. And all that comes in at around £1,000. The Oberheim also includes the UBX and has added extra SEM high pass, band pass and notch filter modes. It's got cross mod, and you can save the vintage panel performance settings per patch. Plus it's got metal shafts on the pots and the OLED screen. So overall it feels like a higher quality build. It feels like a more expensive synth, and that's because it is a more expensive synth, because all that comes in at a price of around £4,000, which is 4 times the price of the Behringer. Here it is for $5,000 in perfect circuit, or you can save space and $1,500 if you get the desktop version. Quick note, I've done this all in mono, and that's because, well, I got absolutely hammered in my OB6 versus OBX8 video because the panning was off, and actually it doesn't really make much of a difference here because the OBXa can do all the 5 panning modes that the Oberheim can do. The big difference there, though, is that on the Oberheim they're saved per patch, on the UBXa they're global but much more flexible, and you can save 8 of them. think I've got them pretty close. It's a 2 oscillator patch, got 2 sawtooths, slightly detuned. And I'm just trying to get the beating identical there. Okay, I think I've just about done everything there. I haven't shown too many sound on sound comparisons, and that's because the sound comparisons had set up, I forgot about the HFE settings and the performance mode. So a couple of ones that you've heard there, you know, I had to redo the performance mode and I had to redo the HFE settings, and it was just taking far too long. I should have had my head screwed on when I did it, when I prepped for it really. I've got a 4-pole filter in there, we've got shorter sounds, we've got complex sounds, we've got basic sounds, classic sounds, so hopefully it gives you a good overall impression of the differences in these two units. As I said in the intro, not a vintage versus modern, but modern versus modern, and the main difference in the sound quality to me is there's a little bit more presence in the Oberheim, in the UBXa. It might be something that you can pull out with an EQ, or it might annoy you. It might be more accurate on the UBXa. I don't know, I've not got an original. So there you have it, if that edit worked out the way I hope it will. So there you have it, if that edit worked out the way I hope it will. So there you have it, if that edit's worked out the way I hope it will. You've got a really good overview of what it is, what it sounds like, and what it sounds like compared to the other one on the market that's replicating the same thing. And I don't think you need me to tell you how successful a product this is going to be. It's already the best-selling synth in Thomann at the minute. So I hope you enjoyed that, and if you did, please don't forget you can watch it whenever you like on our Clubbing TV official YouTube channel on the From the Studio playlist. And if you've got any questions, do drop me in the comments and I will see what I can do to answer them. And do take a look at my Starsky Kart YouTube channel as well, where those much more in-depth videos were originally created. And I will see you next time.